Hello, everyone. Welcome to another exciting episode on the show, Control or Be Controlled, a podcast designed to help you start thinking differently and take control of your life. And I remain your host, Darlington. Today's guest is Justin Bocock, a former U.S. Secret Service Uniform Division officer, retired Mesa Police Department detective, homicide investigator, and author of On Call Case Files from a Career in Homicide. Justin, welcome to Control or Be Controlled.
Thank you very much for having me.
All right, Justin, I would like you to add a little bit to that introduction.
Well, thank you very much. I'm a retired police officer and homicide detective, and I really didn't always want to be a police officer or detective. I just kind of fell into it. After high school, I joined the United States Air Force, where I worked on large cargo airplanes that transported limousines for presidential movements. And that's when I learned about the Secret Service. And after I did 4 years in the Air Force, I applied with the Uniform Division of the Secret Service, which basically they protect the residents and the vehicles of protectees. I was assigned to Vice President Al Gore at the time and his official residence at the Naval Observatory. And that's when I really got a taste of law enforcement, and I really enjoyed it. The Uniform Division was amazing, but it was kind of boring. Protection can be kind of boring, and I wanted the running and jumping. I was in my mid-20s, and I wanted a little bit more excitement. So I ended up going to a local police department in Mesa, Arizona, which is just outside of Phoenix. I went there in 2001. I started out as a patrol officer. I did 6 years as a patrol officer and also a field training officer, meaning I trained new officers. And that was a lot of fun. There was a lot of running and jumping, putting people in handcuffs, doing the day-to-day work of a police officer. But I wanted more. I really started getting into investigations and larger investigations that took more time. So I took the test and applied to be a detective. And in 2007, I was accepted as a detective. In Mesa Police Department, in most police departments, you start out investigating some lower level crimes. For me, in instance, I was the nighttime beer run detective. So if somebody stole beer from a Circle K or a 7-Eleven or a convenience store and the owners filed a police report, that would go to me and I would solve it. One night there was a robbery and I was the only detective on duty in the entire city. So I ended up getting it. And that's when I really fell in love with violent crime. And I ended up solving that armed robbery. And then from there, I figured out my career path. So I continued in the armed robbery world. I was the lead detective on the serial robbery squad. And then in 2012, I tested and was accepted into the homicide unit, where I stayed there until 2021 when I retired.
All right, thank you so much, Justin. So, after spending decades in law enforcement and homicide investigations, what ultimately compelled you to write On Call Case Files from a Career in Homicide?
So I saw after I retired, I ended up I was a subject matter expert consultant and writer for 2 criminal justice textbooks that were in production. This was back in 2001, 2022. Or I'm sorry, 2021, 2022. And that's when I really saw that there was a disconnect between academic law enforcement and the actual application of law enforcement. And I was really curious that a lot of true crime advocates, and to include me, I love true crime and have a lot of friends who like true crime, and we talk about it all the time, that there really was a disconnect between what the media told us, what academia told us, and then the reality of it. So that's when I started writing On Call, which is a case study of 13 homicides that I worked, and I go through them step by step and show the reality, the goods and the bads, things that worked, things that don't work, how the criminal justice system is amazing, and how the criminal justice system does have some faults to it. So I thought that it would be good to have the entire true crime readers could get the full aspect of a criminal investigation from the person who actually worked the case, and give them a more realistic idea of how complex homicide investigations are worked and solved.
All right. Thank you so much, Justin. So, moving on, writing about real cases requires balancing honesty with sensitivity. How did you approach telling these stories while honoring the victims' families and investigations involved?
That's a great question. And it's something that when I was planning the book and thinking about the book that weighed on me heavily because these victims, they've had to live this horror one time and they don't need to relive it. So what I did specifically in the book was the names were all changed. And I explained that in the introduction. As I go through the case files, they're accurate. But the names of the victims and the witnesses have all been changed. The exact locations are never given. And even I don't give the exact dates. I say, summer of 2013 is when this homicide occurred. So I give accurate information, but not enough that people are going to know who the actual victims are, who the witnesses are, because they don't need to relive that. I wanted to tell a story and I wanted to educate people, but you're right. I wanted to be very mindful of the victims, witnesses, and even some of the detectives that were involved in it that also had traumatic incidences involved in these cases. And I didn't want to re-traumatize them.
Thank you so much. That's wonderful. So, who did you write this book for? Who do you hope picks up on call, and what do you hope they experience?
I wrote it for several people, actually. So I wrote it for the true crime advocate and the true crime enthusiast. So they could see, like I said, exactly how a case is worked. A lot of true crime books that I've read and that are out there are written by either true crime enthusiasts and researchers or the prosecutors who prosecuted the case, but very few books are written by the detectives who actually did the interviews, who wrote the search warrants, who had to present the case to county attorneys, who had to testify in court to that case. So I wanted to give that unique perspective to it. Also, in the law enforcement world, there is no official training for working homicides. There's not like a homicide school that you can go to. Now, there are classes. There are some introductory things that go over, the do's and don'ts. But a lot of what we learn is we learn by on-the-job training and we learn from the experience of others. I learned when I went to the homicide world, I used all my experiences from my police work, from being a patrol officer to working beer runs to working robberies and armed robberies and serial robberies. And I used all of those experiences combined together to help me in the homicide world. But I also drew from mentors, from other detectives who had been there. And I asked their opinions, like, have you ever had this happen? And sometimes their answer was, no, I've never seen that. We're just going to have to learn as we go. So this book also helps people who are in law enforcement or want to be in law enforcement. If you live in an area that maybe gets one homicide every 2 years, you're not going to have that experience. But you'll be able to go through the cases that I went through and learn from my experiences, learn from my failures, which I talk about, and also learn from my successes, which I talk about. So it's kind of written for both the true crime enthusiasts and also for law enforcement professionals who want to just kind of hone their professional investigative skills.
All right. Thank you so much. So, moving on, personally for me, I love true crime. So I'm sure this book was also written for me too. I can imagine the type of stories that you have on there. Real life stories that are probably you have changed the name and the scenario. But for someone like me, when I read this type of book, I would have a mental picture of real life happening in real life in real time. So after years of investigating violent crimes, can you tell us what you want readers to understand about the realities of homicide investigations that they may not see in movies or television?
And that's a great question. The reality is that for every hour of police work, knocking on doors, talking to witnesses, investigating crime scenes, there's about 4 to 5 hours of report writing, sitting at a desk and writing a report, sitting at a desk and writing a search warrant, going through thousands, sometimes even 10,000 pages of call detail records, like phone records, and looking for little inconsistencies or little things that you can put together. Meetings, talking with other entities like the federal entities that we worked with, like the FBI, ATF, or the prosecutors. There's a lot of behind the scenes, very administrative type work that you'll never see in a movie because it's kind of boring. But that's what honestly solves crime. I always said that I could put someone in prison for the rest of their life with just my pen and a keyboard, because a lot of the work is done on computers and reading through documents. You still have to get out there and do the old school police work of knocking on doors, talking to witnesses, investigating crime scenes. But a good majority of it is that administrative work, and that's where the real investigation comes in.
Thank you so much, Justin. So, a lot of things you mentioned right now are things we do see in movie. Honestly, about homicide. Maybe there are some you are trying to leave out. I don't know.
I'm
So
sorry,
are there
what was
like
that?
are there like some that you have not mentioned? Because most of the ones you mentioned are the ones we still see on movies.
Yes.
So are there others that we don't see on movies that you have not mentioned?
Yeah, there's, the movies don't always portray the homicide detective. They really show it more as like an action-packed adventure type thing, and it's really not. It, like I said, it's a very methodical. A lot of late nights reading reports, going over videos, looking at videos over and over again, going through paper after paper after paper, and thousands of phone calls, and sometimes listening to interviews over and over and over again, and looking for that little tiny piece, which is exciting as an investigator, because you find that little tiny tidbit in an interview where somebody says something that you didn't hear before, and you're like, oh man, we got that. But yeah, it really is different from the movies. It really is. It's exciting, but it's exciting in its own way. It's not exciting as in running around and pointing your guns at people. In the homicide unit, when we would take somebody into custody or get probable cause to arrest them, usually it was the SWAT team or somebody who was able to deal with violent offenders to do that. So very rarely we were even involved in that. We would just do the interviews afterwards and the search warrants and all of that. So yeah, the movies portray the homicide world. I've seen very few movies that actually get it right. There's sometimes they get it, certain aspects of it right, but not necessarily the whole thing. Oh.
So were there moments from your career that changed the way you viewed people, justice, or the world around you?
So I've always said that justice is something that the courts can give to the victim. I've always said that my job wasn't my job isn't as a professional investigator isn't to give people justice, but to help the courts get all the facts, and then the courts can give that family justice. Because I'm never going to be able to, having dealt with families who've lost loved ones in traumatic, violent instances, I'm never going to be able to give them something that's going to make them feel whole again. But what I can do is I can give the courts, and I can do the best investigation that I can, a thorough, complete investigation, so that the courts, juries, and the judicial system can give the family justice. That's how I've always looked at it. And I always look at that's kind of my duty to the family. I've always told them, I always told families of murder victims and violent crime victims that I can never take it back, and I'm never going to get you justice. But what I can do is get you the best investigation and get you all the facts that I can, so that the judicial system can do what they do.
All right. Thank you so much, Justin. So many people are fascinated by detectives and investigations, but only few understand the emotional weight that comes with this work. How did you and your colleagues handle that responsibility?
That is a great question, and it does take an emotional and a psychological effect on you. Dealing with, I've always said in homicide, there was never a day where somebody lived. if they were calling us or we were coming out, that means that somebody didn't survive. So it's going to be somebody's worst day, and it's going to be a family's worst day. And you really focus on, at the moment that it's happening, you put that professional face on and you do your job, because you know that that's your job. You can't go in there and be emotional. You kind of do push it down and suppress it. And how we dealt with it was, afterwards, when we could take a breath and we kind of got together, our unit and our group, we would kind of take care of each other, because there were several cases that really affected us, and a lot of them involved children or babies. And we would just take care of each other. We really were our own peer support system, because we kind of understood each other. And you talk about it, and sometimes we would cry. Sometimes we would help each other out through it. And then when it was time to go back to work, you put that professional face back on and you do what you have to do, because that's what you have to do as a police officer. You have to present at all times that professional demeanor of strength and professionalism, because that's going to help the victims. And you realize that it may not be healthy to do that, but that's also what the citizens need. And that's what they expect. And it's also the best way you can help them, is by you being strong and professional for them.
Okay, thank you so much. So, after retiring from law enforcement, why was it important for you to continue sharing your knowledge through writing and education?
Because I always felt that police officers should always be learning. As an investigator and as a police officer, I was always trying to find new ways to do things and learning new things, looking at new perspectives and kind of keeping an open mind. And when I was in the police department, I taught several classes on crime scene investigations, initial response to homicide scenes for patrol officers and junior detectives. And I also started teaching classes to civilians at civilian police academies and people who were interested in that. So even in the in retirement, I still want to educate people, and not just citizens, but also potentially law enforcement, about keeping an open mind, and don't let bias get in the way. Don't let preconceived judge. Don't walk into a crime scene and say, "Oh, I already know what happened." When you don't know, let the facts determine what's going on. I'm a teacher kind of by nature, and I love teaching. So I want to use my experience to get it out there so that other people can learn from my experience. And I always say multiple times, learn from the good things I did and learn from the bad things I did. Because there's some things I did where I was biased, and I look back and go, wow, that was not a best choice that I made. But there's other times I did things that were outside of the box and they totally worked. So I like to get people to learn from my experiences. If I can help any detective or true crime enthusiast or anybody with my experiences, then I feel like I've succeeded.
Okay, so when someone finishes reading on call, what is one thing you hope stays with them?
I hope that after they read each, because it's 13 case files and they each go through a different aspect. They each go through the investigation in its whole, but then we focus on a different legal aspect. But if there's one thing I could want the readers to take away from it, it's keep an open mind when doing an investigation, hearing about an investigation, or even just watching a TV show about an investigation. Keep an open mind and look for bias. Look for any bias that the investigators or prosecutors might have. And I always say, follow the evidence. If you want to get rid of your bias or realize the bias, just look at what evidence do you have to support the feeling that you have. If you go, oh, I feel like this person did it, what evidence do you have that shows that other than a gut feeling? So that's what I really would want people to take away is watch your bias, understand your bias, and really focus on facts and evidence when looking at a criminal or a complex investigation.
All right, so is there a question you wish I would have asked you that I did not ask you?
That is a great question. That's a great question, Darlington. No, I think you really hit the. No, there's not. I don't have anything that I thought you were. I liked the questions where it talked about the not just the practical side of law enforcement, but also the emotional side and the emotional toll on the detective. That's usually what I get into. Is, hey, is it that this is how detectives feel? But we already talked about that, so no.
All right. Thank you so much, Justin. Thank you for sharing your experience and giving listeners a deeper understanding of the people, investigations, and realities behind homicide cases. The work highlights not only the pursuit of justice, but also the humanity behind every case. So, for listeners who want to learn about On-Call, a case file from a career in homicide, or connect with your work, where can they find you?
So they can find On Call. My book is on Amazon. And it's also direct links through my website, which is my name. It's www.justinbocock.com, JUSTINBOCOCK.com. And you'll find a link to my book. You'll find a link to my publisher. You'll also see all my appearances. I do speaking engagements, and you can see when those dates are. I also have a blog where I put comments and kind of some insight onto current events. I also investigate officer-involved shootings. So when that kind of stuff comes up, I give an insight as to what's going on behind the scenes in those types of investigations. And there's links to all my other social media on my website. So that's the best way. And that's www.justinbocock.com.
All right, Justin, once again, thank you so much for coming to my show. And do have a wonderful day ahead.
And Darlington, thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate it.